Good morning and welcome to today's program, Organize Your Genealogy. My name is Matthew Banky, and I'm a reference librarian at the Kokomo-Howard Public Library. And today I'm going to talk to you about some different ways that you can organize your genealogy so you can be better focused and accomplish more with your genealogy. I don't know about you, but when it comes to genealogy, I can find myself getting really disorganized and really overwhelmed. I wind up with stacks of papers here, piles of photos there, just kind of stuff everywhere. Maybe getting organized is on your list of New Year's resolutions. So today I'm going to talk about some different strategies for organizing genealogy, both in paper form and digital format. And so I'm going to talk about good practices for storing both copies and originals of genealogy materials. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about preservation in addition to some traditional methods for print organization. So introduction, I use this puzzle image in part because it's encouraging in that you can complete a puzzle. It takes time to kind of sort through the pieces to get the like parts together, like colors together, but it is an activity that is completable, and it just takes some time and a little bit of a strategy. And we can think about that in terms of our genealogy. And so when you get yourself really stuck and get yourself into a real place where you are disorganized and you can't even think clearly, I want to try to think of a strategy where start simple, really start simple. I find that I even like to use totes, which is something that is incredibly simple but very effective. So I put one surname, all the things that I have out that I've been working on in one tote. And at least it's not just strewn all over the place. I even have totes for, other paperwork to keep my other paperwork separate from my genealogy that I'm currently working on. So when it comes to going farther with the organization than just a preliminary housekeeping work, I want to think of what is my highest priority, what surname do I work on the most, and what items are most valuable. So what items do you need to get organized and get into safe area? So photos, family Bibles, birth certificates, military discharges, things that are original are always going to be the highest priority, and then move on from there. But really, you want to start off with identifying your highest priority item. Another really simple and effective method that I have found for organizing genealogy are binders. And I already loved binders from being a student for so long. Binders for me were so vital to my success in graduate school and just to stay organized. So I went with this, and I went with a color coding system. This is my my Banky surname. So this is my my father's side and my father's surname. And I found myself getting really fascinated with this line and doing this color coding method that you see. It helped me to track the 8 children that were born of my third great grandparents that came over from Germany. And I haven't been able to get any farther back yet. It's a brick wall that I'm currently working on. But using color coding has been really helpful. And with binders, you really want to stick with copies. You want copies of documents, and you want copies of photos. You definitely don't want the originals, and I'm gonna talk more about that later on, about the best places to store originals. But just for starters, binders, you want just copies. And in addition to the color coding, really recommend having an index or table of contents. Um, I mean, maybe you know your way around the binder really well, but what you want to think about with genealogy, even if you're relatively young, and the sooner you start, the better. You want to think long term and who will be handling the contents of your research in the future, whether it be family members, whether it be historical societies or libraries. So you can't take things for granted, and you always want everything to be labeled, or um, you can't just say grandma on a document. You want to have their name, their date of birth, and especially with an index or a table of contents, this can really help you to narrow down what's really important, what you keep in a binder, such as what I'm showing you. Um, and also the documents that you want to store, in addition to just your research that you found. Family group sheets are, in my opinion, a great resource for organizing information within a binder. And so I kind of posed the question, like, why do this? It's all online. In my opinion, the slow work is can be at times where you really learn. So all the information is not online, and if you don't do the work yourself, it doesn't really stick the same way. Like for example, Roots Magic and Family Tree Maker, they can produce a family group sheet automatically, but you might not see things if you didn't do it yourself. So I'm going to zoom in here for a second. This happens to be my maternal line. I was talking for a minute about my father's line and showing the examples with the color coding. I did something similar with my mother's surname line. But as you see, um, this family group sheet is not completely filled out, and it's filled out in pencil. And the reason that it's filled out in pencil is that it's so easy to make mistakes. But when you research, and sometimes you're just simply copying birth dates, death dates, places where your family members were born and where they died, where they were married. Um, with this line of the children, one thing that's really neat is that you see migration routes. So the first child, Mary Faye Striggle, she was born in Hagerstown in Wayne County. And then there was another child. See, I stuck this child in here. This is a mystery child who probably died as an infant, but this child, Herman, was on the 1850 census. I can stick a paper person on one of these graphs where I don't have any real record of his long-term existence. Then Joseph is the next in line, Hagerstown. Then Frederick, who was born in Kosciuszko County. And then the rest, then they settled in Collimer in Whitley County. And that's where the last of the three children, including my second great grandfather, were born. Also on this family group sheet that I really like are the names of the children. I kind of did this. This was kind of my own decision. Instead of additional information, I wrote down their children, and luckily they didn't have that many children on this side. But what this does, it kind of helps me to set up the next family group sheet. So if you really do your work thoroughly, next I've got a family group sheet for Mary Faye Baker and Daniel Baker, and more details on their children, the changes of their surname. And if I do that one more time, I've pretty much got the family to close to current. doing this is called reverse genealogy, and family group sheets are a great way of working on reverse genealogy. And it gives you a little bit more freedom when you're working on in pen and paper and an eraser. You have a little bit more freedom to experiment or to make mistakes and to find farther forward lines, which I think is invaluable. Reverse genealogy is what they also call cousin bait. Cousin bait is just a goofy term that helps you to connect with more current relatives, so that you can compare notes and maybe they have something that will help you kind of break down some of your brick walls. So as I mentioned, these group sheets are really, really effective, and I really, really recommend going this route. So next up, I'm going to skip ahead and talk about preservation tips. And preservation is pretty essential with genealogical materials that you collect. And I've had some experience with this on a professional level, with getting to work on a big grant for the Pike County Public Library, which was my previous employer before I came to Kokomo-Howard Public Library. And I helped to digitize the Pike County Veterans Collection, which included a lot of original materials, photographs, all kinds of like military discharges, letters from the Civil War, all kinds of stuff. And I had to learn all about preservation. Still wouldn't call myself an expert or anything, but part of my grant, in addition to digitizing and housing the objects on Content DM and on the Indiana Memory digital library, which is part of the Digital Public Library of America, I got to order a number of archival supplies. And although archival supplies are a little bit pricey, if you care enough, if you care a lot about your genealogy, if you care enough to spend hours and hours researching it, and you've collected lots of stuff, you really want to house it properly. So that's why I'm spending this time on this program explaining this kind of material. So archival products, what are they specifically? One, you need to order from an archival vendor. Gaylord Archival is the one that I used. That's where I just stuck with. And they have very dependable products. And what makes archival products dependable? Basically, I'm going to introduce a few terms. They need to pass the PAT test. They need to be acid-free and lignin-free. And you definitely want to keep your photos and your documents separate. You want to use, over here, we've got archival folders. And so just a few of the archival terms to remember. Acid-free, so it has to have a pH of 7.0 or more. For something to be lignin-free, lignin is actually like wood pulp, and it's highly acidic, and it's contained in things like newspapers. And just, a lot of paper that you will encounter is not archival paper. It needs to be buffered. So a lot of the boxes that you come into contact with that you order from Gaylord, they'll say that they're buffered, and what that means is they've added calcium carbonate, and that's something that will help help it to be at the pH that it needs to be for archival preservation. You also see PA test approved. That means it's the photographic activity test. And basically, it's a safe plastic. It's going to be safe for preservation. And the thing is that most commercial plastics that you come into contact with they are not safe, including, I didn't really mention it, but in the binders, you really want archival, you want sleeves. And the sleeves are pretty cost effective, but they're not archival quality. You know, I'll buy a pack of 100 at Walmart or Meijer, and I will put copies and keep things really well organized. But with with the things that are original copies, you want to buy sleeves that are from Gaylord or another archive company. And for long-term storage, you really want your materials to be in a cool, dry place. So no garages, basements, or attics. You don't want to be somewhere, you don't want them to be somewhere they're going to be exposed to a lot of humidity, a lot of heat, a lot of, honestly, even fluctuations. And you know, you might even want to consider having a dehumidifier in the room where you store your items. Another item that you really want to be careful with are newspapers. And newspapers are something that people really take for granted, but they are probably one of the most unstable formats for paper. And so you want to have special box and special sleeves. In fact, some archivists recommend just making copies of newspapers and not even keeping them around. That's how acidic they are. And they will actually contaminate if you have other documents in the area. They'll become more problematic, and they'll degrade as a result of being stored near them. So you really want to use archival tissue paper to kind of layer your boxes, especially if you have things that are going to be housed with other documents. So although I didn't have a lot of before and after photos of my project that I worked on at Pike County, I just thought I'd share another photo. It looks a lot like the puzzle pieces, doesn't it? They're photographs that are a huge mess. And I feel like a lot of us have this. It's really hard to organize photos, especially. But I spent a lot of time when I was down in Pike County grappling with how I was going to store things and where I was going to store things. And I kind of inherited a mess with the photographs. They were basically just in loose folders. They weren't even in boxes, but there were thousands. And luckily, I had a lot of them identified. There were enough of the photos that were identified and that were housed together by family. So I just had a mess. And I was at this job for 2 years. So when I got the chance to order archival supplies, the photos were on top of my list. And I had photos that were for veterans, but then I had a whole bunch more of just other photos that were donated that were priceless. So I was able to take kind of a huge mess and turn it into this. So these archival boxes are kind of the epitome of sterile organization, but you can't imagine how excited I was. And so I've got within these boxes, these are called flip top boxes. Within these boxes, I have the photos inside of acid-free folders. And because I was doing a grant project, I actually counted every single one of these photos, and I had over 2,000. I had something like 2,500 photos. And, I was able to put them into categories and have an item count within each box. So doing this is a little bit of an extreme example, but it's really highly recommended. Anymore, I'm going to talk in a minute about digital preservation, but having all of these scanned, I don't know, just gave me a real peace of mind. I'm not even at this library anymore, but I feel so much better because so many things can happen. We actually had a roof leak while I was at the library, and that really gave me a sense of forethought and urgency about doing something so that there would be long-term preservation. And so many things can happen in a home, and so if you have a little healthy fear and mindset, that will make you do something and will make you actually come up with a plan, order some archival supplies, and start working on it, all the better. So for digital files, so everything that I had in those boxes exists on Content DM, Indiana memory, and I think all of those I scanned as TIFFs, and TIFFs versus JPEGs. So when you scan an item, you can choose a number of different options. And the thing that with TIFFs is that TIFFs are going to be the equivalent of long-term storage of putting your stuff in an archive box, whereas a JPEG is going to be more like the copy that you make that you keep in just a cheap binder. So the reason that TIFFs are a permanent storage file are that they don't lose any compression over time. JPEGs are what are known as lossy. And so each time you open up a JPEG, you are going to lose part of the file, and it's going to degrade in quality. You're going to lose pixels, basically. This might sound really complicated. It's really not. But the only problem with TIFFs, though, is that the files are huge, and not everything can read. TIFFs aren't always readable. So a lot of times, if you are going to digitize files, you're going to want to scan them as TIFFs and then take the TIFFs and create JPEGs. And then it's kind of up to you on having a file naming structure. But the big thing is, in addition to how you organize the information, where you store the information. So I've got a picture here of my laptop. I've got an external hard drive, and then just a simple flash drive. One thing that's missing from this image is the cloud. And I mean, these formats are physical for storing physical digital space. I can store it on my laptop. I could store it on the external hard drive and the flash drive. But having a cloud service is really important because there's a concept known as locks. Maybe you've heard of it. It means lots of copies, keeps things safe. And I'm a big proponent of this because, again, all kinds of things can happen. These flash drives can crash. They can get damaged by water. Same thing with the laptop. So having a cloud-based program is really important. And one that I use that you might not think about that's pretty solid is actually Google Photos. And although using a digital scanner is definitely going to be the best way to go for your long-term digital preservation, you might want to go ahead and even take photos with your phone. Honestly, the scanning features for phones have gotten way better, so they're not really that far off a digital scanner anymore. They usually you won't be able to make TIFFs by taking pictures with your phone, unless you download you can look around and download scanning tools. But having your photos backed up on like Google Photos or different cloud-based program is going to really help you have some peace of mind and know that long-term there's going to be some kind of backup more than just physical. And so, yeah, pretty much this is a little bit of a reiteration, but just know, stick with a method when you name your files. It can be really simple. It can be the date of the photo, or it can be, you can just come up with an accession number and stick with it. And in my own file structure, I basically separated the maternal lines from the paternal lines. And I have just, there are just two main file folders. And then I build the surnames within them. So I hope this has been helpful. And I hope that this is a good, introduction to organizing your genealogy. And if you find yourself getting caught up in the haze of disinformation and finding yourself swamped with just stuff everywhere, take a step back and just take a breath and think about one area that you can work on, and then just kind of follow some of these steps, and you'll find yourself feeling some relief and realize that you can do it eventually with all of your genealogy, all of your materials. And I hope this has been helpful. If you are looking for any additional help, come into the Kokomo-Howard Public Library, go downstairs, and the staff down in genealogy and local history help you. We are at 220 North Union in Kokomo, Indiana. Thank you and have a great day.